In New Zealand, the RSE or Recognised Seasonal Employers Scheme is a success. Employers love it.
When I was chairman of RSE, I was interviewed by the World Bank and they said to me that at the time they saw the RSE scheme in New Zealand as the best labour mobility program in the world. It was most enduring and it was had the most trust applied to it and it was benefiting both parties really, really well.
It works for the workers.
I love coming to New Zealand because it gives me a great opportunity for me and my family.
We quite reliant on RSEs. They allow us to achieve the goals that we would like to achieve. And of course they gain from it as well, yeah.
Even our Prime Minister can't get enough of them.
The cap's increased to 19,000, another 3,000 this year. Over the next 5 years, it should move up to 38,000. We are not going to have any constraints on labour shortages in the agriculture sector.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade calls it an immigration success story and sings its praises in videos like this.
My name is Telma Muliaki and I'm from Vanuatu, Tana Island, and I'm here in New Zealand to work as RSE workers, and I am the supervisor in the Park House. I decided to leave my family back home and come here to earn money to help develop my family, especially for the school fee for my kids, because I really want them to have a good development in the future.
I've been involved with the RSEs for probably a good 10 years. For businesses, it means reliability of staff. At peak times when we need staff, it gives a guarantee that the work is going to get done.
In the year to June 2023, 48,000 people left the island nations to participate in the schemes. That's double the numbers of a decade ago. And the leaders of those nations are starting to express concern about what the outflow of people does to the communities left behind.
We are separating fathers from their children. In some instances, children are left with their grandparents or other relatives to be able to allow for both parents to travel on these skills.
About 1/5 of Vanuatu's and Samoa's productive male workforce has left for New Zealand or Australia.
That means there's not maths teachers in some classrooms. That means there's mechanics missing from workshops, bank tellers gone, farmers not there producing food. So it has huge impacts. Imagine if 20% of New Zealand's productive population went offshore.
Based on our needs, we need to cap so that we retain some of our own productive sector personnel.
Kia ora, I'm Susana Suisuiki, and today on The Detailed, we look at how a scheme that was initially a financial win-win has come at a huge cost, contributing to a Pacific brain drain. Joining me is the co-director of Massey University's Pacific Research and Policy Centre, Professor Regina Scavens. In an article she co-wrote last year with Dr. Api Movono, she said the scheme is starting to undermine Pacific communities.
I think it absolutely is important to acknowledge why why these schemes are desirable for people from Pacific countries. Look, my parents came out to New Zealand from the Netherlands and Slovenia post-World War II because times were tough in Europe at the time. People often migrate for new opportunities and they look for opportunities to earn more income. And for someone from Vanuatu, there was a World Bank study last year which showed that might mean earning 4 or 5 times as much as they could earn back home. So that's really significant. So absolutely understand that bit of the equation in terms of the real win it can be for particular families and the income that they can earn in a relatively short period of time. But some of the less documented negative impacts include the economic impacts back home of who you are losing. It's absolutely a misnomer to suggest that it is only unskilled workers coming here. Many of the people, for a start, are highly skilled in agriculture and are very skilled at providing for the food security of their families at home in Pacific Island countries. That should not be underestimated. You and I know how much grocery bills are. If you can actually provide your own family with healthy food from your own land, from the Vanua, and you can also sell food at the market, that can be a good livelihood, but it's also contributing to your country's food security. And again, we've all lived through COVID lockdown and border closure times. So we know that we can't rely on food supply chains from overseas. So food security shouldn't be underestimated. That's one part of it. But then there are so many other skilled people who are being recruited. So you've got teachers. At one stage, Samoa was pushing back when they realised how many mathematics teachers they had lost to these schemes. Mechanics, bank tellers, airport control tower staff, all sorts of people. When Dr. Api Mavono and I were leaving Vanuatu last September, there were huge delays at the airport, and we were told it was because of the number of airport staff, especially in key positions like control tower, that had gone overseas on seasonal employment schemes. And so, you know, frankly, for tourists leaving Vanuatu at that time, they might have had a lovely holiday, but perhaps left them with a less than positive impact of at the end of their trip, because there was such delays at the airport.
Thousands of travellers are stranded after Air Vanuatu cancelled all of its international flights, including those to and from Australia.
Travellers say they've been left out of pocket as they desperately try to return home.
Forget a once-in-a-lifetime island view today in Port Vila. Air Vanuatu offering passengers an unforgettable island queue.
Couldn't get hold of them. Nobody was answering the phone.
This morning we went into Air Vanuatu and there was a line out of the office and out onto the street.
As an aside, things have got worse since then. Air Vanuatu has gone into voluntary administration, leaving not just tourists stranded, but seasonal workers who can't get back home.
The collapse of Air Vanuatu means hundreds of seasonal workers from the islands are stuck in New Zealand with work visas about to expire, potentially making them overstayers. MB figures show more than 210 recognised seasonal workers from Vanuatu have visas that expire in the next 2 days, and a further 1,458 will expire by the 9th of June.
These guys have left families behind in Vanuatu to come and work in New Zealand for 7 months. This is the end of that 7 months. They've all been really looking forward to getting home and to not be able to jump on the plane and go see their kids, wives, girlfriends and the rest of their family is pretty distressing for them.
But back to Regina Scavens and the impact on the islands of large parts of the population packing up and leaving.
Another interesting study was in Vanuatu. They looked at the whole labour system, and they found that 60% of businesses interviewed had lost a worker to the RSE or the PALM schemes. So then there's the social impacts. So the social impacts, they are also documented quite well now in the World Bank study that came through last year. But they include things like children being out without their parents for long periods of time. When the RSE first started, and New Zealand started its scheme before Australia, the first 10 years or so, the majority of people were just coming to do one season over here and helping their families out with the income from that. But now we see people coming year after year after year because of the greater earnings they can have, but staying for longer periods because the length of time has also increased. So that means that children are without key parental guidance at certain times, and that's seen to be disruptive. Also, particularly when women are recruited for the schemes, and the schemes have only had about 13% women so far, even though they've tried to recruit more. But there's a lot of suspicion, a lot of gossip, and increases in domestic violence with concerns about infidelities, which are just because of long absences, long periods apart. So it's really disruptive to some family relationships. And then also you're missing out on some key adults who would otherwise be contributing to the broader community in rural communities and on the urban fringes of many Pacific Island countries. People who otherwise would be running church activities, would be running cultural activities, would be key to those things. They can send money home, but it's not the same as having these people on the ground. So those are just some of the things that have been commented on in terms of some of the negatives.
Why do you think those risks weren't raised or analysed thoroughly from the start?
I think because everybody was fixated on the economic gains. So clearly this was a win for New Zealand initially, and then for Australia as well, because we had labour shortages in key sectors, key primary sectors. So it was going to improve our economic development if we had people here to harvest the fruit or to prune the vines, etc., for the wine industry. So that was going to be good for us. Also, because of those very clear possibilities for Pacific peoples to earn double, triple, quadruple or more than they could earn back home in the same period of time, that was seen as highly desirable. So those wins became the focus of a lot of the attention. After a while, people started pointing out issues of labour rights for the workers in country and whether or not they were getting adequate pastoral care. And I think those issues are continuing to be put on the table and they haven't fully been resolved. So that's really important. For example, workers being unaware of why certain things are being docked from their pay, being treated in the way that Samoa's Prime Minister, the Honourable Naomi Mataafa, has pointed out that it is really clear that the Pacific countries were seen more as outposts that were providing cheap labour to Australia and New Zealand. And so there've been concerns about those things as well. And then just about things like the standard of accommodation and the opportunities for people to really fully maximise the benefits from that could come and can come from being on the RSE scheme. So like more opportunities for training and professional development while they're here could be one thing. I saw an editorial from the New Zealand Herald at the end of last year that commented on the then Deputy Prime Minister Carmel Sepuloni's visit to the Pacific in April last year. And she was talking to a lot of leaders about the RSE scheme and how they felt about things. And the big push at the time was actually needing to change the name and the culture of the RSE scheme. So people saw that the name Recognised Seasonal Employee program as being quite demeaning. And they felt that there could be a name more befitting of a relationship that was more mutually beneficial, let's say. Can I just share one experience? Api and I, when we were in Vila in Vanuatu, we spoke to someone who'd been to New Zealand once, to Central Otago, to work. And he talked about how he had a good employer. He'd really enjoyed his time there. And actually, they'd always had time off in the weekends and they were allowed to use the van to go and travel around. So he said, we got to be like tourists. We got to go and visit different towns and tourist attractions in the Central Otago and Queenstown area. It was really interesting. And this was a guy who was living in sort of an urban village on the fringes of Vila now, and he was wanting to get involved in tourism. And Api and I were thinking, wouldn't it have been great if he could have used a day off per week to perhaps be mentored by a tourism business in Central Otago, so that when he returned home, he actually had that type of insight into running a tourism business and perhaps would be more likely to understand fully about opportunities for marketing, for business development, for reaching international guests and providing the services they wanted, things like that. There really are opportunities with these schemes. They're definitely not all bad, but it's been problematic the way in which they have transformed over time, I think, and the impacts they're having on Pacific Island countries. And that needs more attention, and we need to hear more from Pacific leaders about what they're wanting from the schemes and what controls they want to put in place.
In 2022, RNZ Pacific journalist Lydia Lewis covered Samoa's Prime Minister Fiamea Naomi Mataafa's visit to New Zealand, where she spent time with the RSE workers in Hawke's Bay. Here's her insight into the response from Pacific leaders to the scheme.
So two that spring to mind are Fiamea and also Vanuatu. That Vanuatu's had quite a few leaders in the time that we've been reporting together on these issues. Four in my time in this position. Samoa's Prime Minister has said losing human resources through regional labour schemes is a worry, and she said that on multiple occasions.
There's one thing I don't like about the labour mobility thing. It could be seen that somehow, we're just these outposts where we grow people, either to send them off as sports people or to send them off as labour, labour mobility teams and so forth, as though, that's our lot in life. I would like Samoa to be a country where people want to live there, that they're proud of it, that they want to contribute to the country.
At engagements right across the Pacific, from when we were in Papua New Guinea earlier last year, when the US president was supposed to go to Papua New Guinea for that event. She spoke about it there, and it's been spoken about quite widely. And then we have the Vanuatu government who have also spoken about the brain drain, because a significant number of workers come to Aotearoa, and they've said that they've even started to develop a national employment policy to address a potential brain drain. So quite significant stuff here for governments to put in plans in place to try and address this issue. And on top of it, it's a regional issue. It is something that has been discussed by Pacific leaders at the last Pacific Islands Forum leaders meeting in Rarotonga. And they really just want their countries to be at the centre of the talks for this to benefit them.
Massey University's Senior Lecturer in Development Studies, Dr. Api Salome Movono, says it's the big country's responsibility to address the problems of villages being emptied of workers.
They have the money, they have the expertise, and it is in their interest to invest in Pacific Islanders and to listen to what Pacific Island leaders are saying. Because what they're saying is there is a problem here.
I asked Lydia if the workers and employees she spoke with in 2021 were aware of the economic and social impacts.
They've definitely been aware of it. It's not something that I've reported on extensively, but back in 2021 when I spoke with employers when Whiamea came to Aotearoa in Hawke's Bay, it was something that they mentioned. They mentioned that they were aware of it, that there are social impacts. That one employer told me stories of how some of their workers had come to Aotearoa and they had families back home, and then they'd get into relationships with people here, and they were working on a community-led approach, even working with their local chiefs and making sure that the people that were coming to Aotearoa, knew what they were in for and that kind of thing. But this is work that's just at the beginning stages, and New Zealand has a long way to go in making sure that, we're providing culturally appropriate support. And as a non-Pacifica journalist, it's something that I'm learning about as well. You can't just, when you don't have lived experiences, which a lot of these bosses won't have, they may not be from Pacific island nations or small island developing states, it's really hard to provide that kind of care when you don't have that lived experience yourself. And back in 2021, it seemed like they were at the beginning stages of projects that they were wanting to create in order to support communities.
So is the RSE scheme still a win-win initiative, or is it becoming a win-lose situation? Here's what Professor Regina Scavens has to say.
I think New Zealand's a country that cares enough to make it more of a win-win. And I think with more attention to the social side of things and more attention to economic development in the countries back home, and that might include more professional development and training opportunities for RSE workers when they are in New Zealand, then that could really help. And perhaps reconsidering in a conversation with Pacific Island leaders the periods of time that people are over here for, and whether or not the same people can be recruited time after time, or whether the opportunity can be extended to those who perhaps haven't had the opportunity to earn the greater income and come and work over here for a period of time. That's something that could be considered as well.
That's it for today. Thank you to our guests, Professor Regina Scavens and Lydia Lewis. The Detail is funded by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was produced by Alexia Russell and engineered by William Saunders. I'm Susana Sriswiki. Tofa Soifua.